a chosen one's. From the earliest moments you can remember, there was a spark inside you that refused to be extinguished by doubt or fear. It was never about fitting in or living up to external standards. It was about navigating an uncharted realm that you sensed existed beyond the ordinary. Even as a child, you felt a mysterious pull, a subtle calling that nudged you to look deeper into things everyone else seemed to accept at face value. At first, the whispers of intuition were faint, like echoes in an empty corridor, easily dismissed by those who listened only with their ears. When you tried to share these impressions, you were met with uncomfortable silences or dismissive laughs, leaving you questioning whether you were fundamentally flawed. Yet, despite the hurt, you could not deny the truth stirring in your soul. Where others saw randomness, you discerned patterns. Where they scoffed at coincidence, you glimpsed a divine choreography at work. Each time you attempted to suppress your visions, they returned with greater intensity, as though they refused to let you shrink into the mundane. In the beginning, the weight of people's skepticism was almost too much to bear. The labels they pinned on you, eccentric, delusional, outlandish, stung more than you let on. Friends distanced themselves, and family members offered worried glances, caught between concern and confusion. You tried to pretend their opinions did not matter, but on some nights, when the moon shone just right and all pretenses fell away, you fought back tears of isolation. The pain, however, became your crucible, forging in you a quiet resilience you never knew you possessed. Instead of crushing your spirit, each judgment became fuel, spurring you to delve deeper into the mysteries only you could perceive. Eventually, you reached a crossroads where you had to decide: deny this intuitive gift for the sake of normalcy, or embrace it wholeheartedly and risk alienation. It was not a simple choice. A part of you longed for the comfort of acceptance, to blend seamlessly with those who never questioned the limits of their five senses. But another part, a wiser, more persistent voice, insisted that you could never find fulfillment by abandoning what made you unique. In your most introspective moments, you realized that the very trait causing your ostracism was also your bridge to profound truths. So you chose to walk the unmarked path, trusting that the visions you received were not random illusions, but glimpses into a realm that few dared to explore. Even if the rest of the world branded you misguided, something within urged you forward, assuring you that destiny often starts as a whisper only the brave can hear. Over time, the tangled threads of mockery and misunderstanding wove themselves into a tapestry of purpose. What once felt like an unrelenting burden began to reveal itself as an initiation into a role you were born to fulfill. With each small step, each intuitive nudge you honored, you sensed a subtle momentum building, an undercurrent of promise that, in the end, nothing was ever truly impossible. You learned to move quietly, at first, tucking your revelations into corners of your heart where only your own conscience could judge them. The world outside was noisy, filled with opinions shaped by convention and fear, and you found solace in solitude rather than risking the scorn of those unwilling to suspend disbelief. Sometimes, in those reflective moments, you would question whether you were condemning yourself to a lifetime of secrecy. Yet each time you considered conforming for the sake of acceptance, the visions returned like a strong tide, pushing you beyond the shore of normalcy. At night, you often gazed at the stars, comforted by the idea that countless unknown worlds existed beyond what the naked eye could see. It soothed you to remember how vast existence truly was and how little even the smartest among us truly understood. Beneath that starlit canopy, you felt a profound reassurance that the naysayers' judgment stemmed from fear more than from fact. In their eyes, any deviation from the known was suspect, and your ability to sense the unseen made you an unsettling presence. You refused to let their discomfort define your reality, choosing instead to strengthen your connection to the currents of intuition flowing through you. As you became more attuned to these invisible signals, you noticed how events in your life, once chalked up to mere coincidence, began to unfold with a kind of poetic resonance. You would sense changes in the emotional energy of a room before anyone spoke, or predict a stranger's needs without understanding why. These moments left you awestruck, but also burdened by the question of what to do with such knowledge. You were increasingly certain that you were not meant to remain silent forever. Still, you also knew that trust must be earned, not demanded. When you began hinting about the subtle patterns you observed, the initial response was predictable polite smiles, followed by uneasy jokes about your eccentricities. That old pang of rejection twisted in your chest, and yet there were glimpses, fleeting but unmistakable, of fascination in certain people's eyes. Perhaps it was the sincerity in your voice or the quiet conviction with which you described what you felt. Whatever the cause, a tiny crack appeared in the wall of their skepticism. Some would circle back with curious questions days or weeks later, testing the waters as if part of them hoped you might be onto something real. You discovered a hidden strength in these small interactions, a confidence that did not hinge on the collective approval you once craved. Each time you shared just enough to spark interest without overwhelming the listener, you felt a satisfying alignment between you were inside and how you presented yourself in the world. No longer were you suppressing your essence to avoid discomfort. You were allowing it to flow, gently but persistently, shaping your identity around an unwavering truth you could not unsee, nor were you willing to deny any longer. Inevitably, as your comfort in your role grew, the visions intensified. Nights brought vivid dreams that were unspooled like prophecies, some far too grand and strange to mention without careful discernment. Daytime offered flashes of insight about unfolding events, whether in your personal circle or on a larger scale. It felt as if you were being guided, or perhaps summoned, to serve as a conduit for messages that most people either ignored or simply couldn't perceive. Not every scene you envisioned was pleasant. Some foreshadowed collective turmoil, and others highlighted hidden sorrows in the lives of those you knew. The responsibility weighed on you. It wasn't just strangers and acquaintances who struggled to accept your gifts. Even those closest to you wrestled with what they saw as your inexplicable transformation. A confusion turned to frustration when you tried to articulate truths that defied logic. Friends who once valued your grounded perspective found it increasingly difficult to reconcile your new depths of perception with the image they had in mind. Some parted ways quietly, as though your newly awakened sensitivities threatened the comfort of shared memories. Yet you pressed on, buoyed by a sense that you were evolving in alignment with a cosmic design far older than humanity's limited understanding. You no longer felt the need to mitigate the tension between your mystical experiences and the external disbelief. Instead, you saw yourself as a traveler at the edge of two realms, the tangible and the intangible, charged with bridging that gap when the moment was right. This shift in mindset freed you from the chains of needing acceptance from anyone else. Over time, the mocking comments began to lose their sting. Where once an insult could leave you reeling for days, now it barely ruffled your composure. You realized that their judgment wasn't truly aimed at you, it was directed at the part of reality they feared to acknowledge. This recognition wasn't an excuse to dismiss their perspectives, but it reminded you that your self-worth could never hinge on opinions rooted in ignorance. Your focus turned instead to maintaining the clarity of your inner vision, ensuring you remained a trustworthy steward of the insights bestowed upon you. To your surprise, occasional allies emerged from the unlikeliest corners. Someone you'd barely spoken to in years might reach out with a hushed confession of a recurring dream or a hidden fear that mirrored your own. In those moments, you sensed destiny weaving people together at precisely the right intervals. It was as if unseen forces orchestrated each encounter, ensuring that no honesty was ever wasted, and no cry for guidance went unheard. Recognizing this orchestration gave you hope, not only for your own journey, but for the collective awakening that seemed to be rumbling beneath the surface of everyday life. If you were brave enough to heed the call, perhaps others would find the courage to do the same, each guided by an invisible thread of divine intention. There were nights when the pull of prophecy felt so strong that your entire body hummed with anticipation. You would wake before dawn, heart pounding, mind ablaze with symbols that seemed plucked from another dimension. It took discipline to remain calm, to remind yourself that not every message demanded immediate action. You started keeping a journal by your bedside, jotting down what you could remember before it evaporated in the morning light. The pages began to fill with cryptic sketches, half-formed words, and riddles only your future self might decode. This practice became a ritual of sorts, a sacred dialogue with the unseen. In those early hours, while the world was still cloaked in darkness, you felt closest to whatever source was whispering these truths. Though it was exhilarating, it also challenged you to differentiate between a genuine call to share and a moment when silence was more prudent. You discovered that premature disclosure often elicited confusion or dismissal, so you learned to let each vision ripen in your heart until circumstances aligned for its release. Paradoxically, as you grew more certain of what you were seeing, you also cultivated a deeper humility. You recognized that being shown future outcomes or hidden truths did not make you superior to anyone else. If anything, it reminded you how delicate the dance of existence truly was. Free will could alter timelines, hearts could shift destinies, and the labyrinthine logic of the universe often unfolded in ways no human could fully grasp. You became comfortable with uncertainty, even as your sensitivity to subtle energies continued to expand. What truly tested your resolve were the moments when those you cared about dismissed your warnings, only to realize later how accurate they had been. The heartbreak on their faces, the regret in their voices, these carried a heavy emotional toll. You grappled with guilt, wondering if you should have found a better way to communicate, or if you should have pressed harder for them to believe. Over time, though, you realize that each person's journey is their own, and the lessons they learn from disbelief or tragedy are sometimes the catalysts for deeper transformation. You could not save everyone from their fated experiences, nor was it your duty to do so. Yet in the midst of this complex dance between revealing and concealing, you felt an ever-growing sense of kinship with something greater. Whether you named it the universe, the divine, or a cosmic consciousness, you sensed a grand tapestry at play, one in which your role was both purposeful and fleeting. This realization offered you solace on lonely days when the weight of foreknowledge threatened to crush your spirit. It reminded you that for every relationship lost, another door opened, and for every tear shed, there was a flicker of renewed hope in someone else's eyes. You pressed on, heart firm in the conviction that what you carried was meant to guide, not to conquer, and to illuminate rather than to blind. Gradually, you began to notice subtle changes in the atmosphere around you. Your presence, once cause for eye-rolling or hushed gossip, now evoked an odd mixture of curiosity and caution. Former skeptics would linger a moment longer in conversation, even if only to dissect your perspectives more thoroughly. You welcomed these attempts at understanding, knowing that true insight often reveals itself in the questioning phase. The more openly you shared, the more you realized how profoundly human it is to yearn for something beyond the confines of everyday logic. Yet, you did not revel in this attention. Instead, it spurred you to refine your ability to communicate. You discovered that words could be as powerful as visions themselves, if carefully chosen. Rather than launching into grand forecasts of what lay ahead, you found ways to relate your insights to universal experiences: loss, hope, love, fear. Framing your visions through this shared human lens allowed more people to connect with the essence of what you conveyed. While not everyone believed you outright, they at least recognized the sincerity fueling your words. Your personal life also evolved in unexpected ways. The path you had chosen, or that had chosen you, demanded rigorous self-examination. Each time you gazed into someone else's fears, you found yourself compelled to confront your own. By guiding others toward acceptance of the mysteries of life, you realized how many layers of your own psyche remained unexplored. Old wounds, unacknowledged traumas, and forgotten memories emerged, asking to be integrated with the same compassion you offered others. It became impossible to hide from yourself, especially when the mirror of prophecy reflected your own vulnerabilities so vividly. This inner work was not a detour from your calling, it was integral to it. As you healed, your visions grew clearer and more nuanced. The intangible threads connecting you to the collective consciousness felt more vibrant, as if your personal transformations rippled outward, affecting the very fabric of the reality you perceived. The synergy of these two processes, internal healing and outward sharing, wove together seamlessly, allowing you to approach even the weightiest of messages with grace rather than fear. By now, you had also gathered a small circle of kindred spirits who might not experience visions with the same intensity but understood the role you played. Their support acted like a buffer against the vestiges of mockery that still drifted in from the periphery. Occasionally, they would come to you with their own revelations, timidly presented yet surprisingly poignant. You recognized that, in a sense, you were helping pave the way for others to trust their own inner voice. This sense of collective awakening filled you with cautious optimism. Perhaps the world was not as hostile to mystery as it once seemed. Perhaps it was merely waiting for someone to hold a steady light that showed it was safe to step beyond accepted boundaries. And so you continued, a messenger no longer walking alone, but gradually joined by others seeking that same elusive horizon. The notion of a Kozusan path was something you both accepted and questioned in equal measure. On the one hand, it made sense of your life's many twists and turns, framing your visions as milestones of destiny. On the other, it raised existential queries. Why this error? Did free will even exist if your foresight sometimes made outcomes seem predetermined? Each new revelation brought a cascade of philosophical ponderings that kept your mind engaged long after the world had fallen asleep. There were nights when these thoughts felt like an endless labyrinth, and yet you couldn't help but be drawn deeper into its corridors. Through it all, you maintained a profound respect for the limits of language. Trying to pin down the workings of the divine with human words was like attempting to contain the ocean in a single glass. You found that metaphors, stories, and allegories offered the closest approximation to what you perceived. When people asked you outright to prove your visions, you learned to respond with a gentle smile and an invitation to observe the unfolding of events themselves. In a sense, time became your greatest ally, for what was once deemed impossible often materialized precisely as you'd foreseen. This alignment with time did not serve as a trophy for your ego, but as a testament to the intricate web that connected all things. If you felt pride, it was quickly tempered by the humbling realization that you were simply a participant in a cosmic dance beyond anyone's full comprehension. Rather than crowning yourself a herald of irrefutable truth, you regarded your role as a caretaker of possibility. After all, even the clearest premonition could be rendered moot by a single act of human compassion or a choice made in love rather than fear. Yet your life was not all contemplative reverie and quiet validation. Practical concerns occasionally pressed upon you. There were bills to pay, social obligations to fulfill, and mundane tasks that never ceased demanding your attention. Reconciling the sacred with the ordinary became its own challenge, forcing you to learn how to integrate heightened awareness into routines like grocery shopping or managing finances. You discovered that such grounding tasks offered a strange form of balance. They kept you tethered to the shared reality of everyday life, ensuring you never drifted so far into the ethereal that you lost empathy for the challenges most people faced. In those small, ordinary moments, you often sense the true power of your gift, not in predicting grand events or unveiling cosmic secrets, but in bringing a gentle sense of wonder to the simplest experiences. You found that by recognizing the divine in a cup of tea or a child's laughter, the gap between you and others diminished. They might not see the visions you did, but they could feel the reverence you held for existence itself. And that feeling, you realized, was sometimes the only bridge you needed to bring hearts closer to embracing what once seemed implausible. Whenever the weight of your calling became overwhelming, you returned to a simple breathing practice that served as your anchor, a reliable way to reclaim equilibrium amid the swirling energies you navigated daily. In the soft hush of early morning, you sat with a straight spine, closed your eyes, and inhaled slowly through your nose to a count of 4, letting your abdomen expand fully. Holding this breath for 7 counts, you imagined pure light filling every cell of your body. Then, in a measured exhalation lasting 8 counts, you released tension, sending out any remaining worry. Repeating this cycle, you felt your pulse slow and your mind clear, as though each round of breathing recalibrated you to a steady baseline of calm. This practice was deceptively simple, yet profoundly impactful. It reminded you that while you could peer into future possibilities or sense hidden facets of reality, you also existed in a physical vessel that needed care. Your heart might be tuned to higher frequencies, but it was still a human heart, subject to stress and fatigue. By consciously directing your breath, you fostered a sense of safety within yourself, making it easier to hold space for the myriad emotions and energies that flowed your way. Over time, you taught this breathing method to a handful of those who genuinely yearned for inner stability, finding that it often became a doorway for them to trust their own subtle insights. In moments of deep inner stillness, you sensed that the breath itself was a conduit to something divine, carrying wisdom from the intangible into the physical realm. Each inhalation felt like a gentle reminder of life's boundless potential. Each exhalation was a release from the constraints of worry, skepticism, and doubt. You realized that the real miracle wasn't in foreseeing events or validating hidden truths. It was in remembering how intricately connected everything truly was, including the air filling your lungs. On days when you felt tested, perhaps by a scornful remark or the anxiety of not knowing whether to disclose a difficult premonition, you returned to your breath as your first and most reliable ally. It asked nothing of you except presence, and in giving that presence, you often found answers in the quiet spaces between one breath and the next. This was how you reconciled your human vulnerabilities with the vast mysteries you sensed. The more you opened to the flow, the more your inner and outer worlds synchronized. A clear mind unveiled clearer visions, a calm heart fostered more empathetic connections. Gradually, your breathing practice became a shared language with certain others who were seeking a thread of solace. You gently guide them through the counts, watching as their shoulders relaxed and their eyes opened to you the depth had long known. Whether they fully accepted your prophetic senses or not, they experienced a tangible shift in their own state of being. That was enough. It proved that at least one universal truth existed beyond all debate. In the simple act of conscious breathing, we find a home within ourselves. As the years flowed on, the tapestry of your life became more intricate, woven with threads of both hardship and revelation. With each vision that proved accurate, the scoffers had less to say. Some retreated to avoid confronting what they could not reconcile, while others cautiously approached, asking questions in hushed tones. You never gloated; you had grown beyond such impulses. Instead, you answered quietly, offering whatever insights you could share without imposing your worldview. Your patience seemed to disarm even the most hesitant inquirers, for they sensed that you harbored no desire to convert anyone into a follower or disciple. Meanwhile, people who once dismissed you began to open up about their own strange experiences, trances, coincidences, unsettling dreams. They came seeking validation that they weren't alone, that something larger than themselves might be at play in the background of life. You listened, eyes brimming with empathy, knowing full well how lonely it could feel to carry glimpses of a reality that defies common explanations. In those conversations, you noticed a profound shift. What once separated you from others now functioned as a bridge, creating a space where they felt safe to explore their deeper questions. The paradox was that the more your capacity for foresight gained credibility, the less you felt the need to use it to prove anything. You saw how the knowledge could become a burden if wielded irresponsibly, potentially robbing others of the growth that comes from facing their own uncertainties. So you learned discernment on a new level, waiting for the moment when you felt an inner high yes, before sharing a specific vision. Even then, you do so gently, mindful that prophecy can inspire awe but also fear. There were still moments when you wrestled with doubt, times when you longed for a mentor of your own, someone to reassure you that this path was real and not a product of your imagination. But you found that mentors arrived in subtle forms, a passing stranger's wise remark, an insightful line in a book you picked up by chance, or a conversation with a child who seemed to know more about wonder than any adult you'd ever met. In their own ways, these moments became your confirmation, each one an unlikely puzzle piece snapping into place, forming a bigger picture of what it meant to be guided. Relationships, too, transformed under the influence of your evolving worldview. You let go of connections that thrived on surface-level interactions, instead seeking depth and authenticity. Those who stayed close began to value you not just for your gift, but for the person you had become: resilient, introspective, caring. The more you honored your calling, the more you found you had to offer kindness, a patient ear, and sometimes a vision of possibilities that rekindled hope where it had been lost. Through it all, you recognized that your journey was far from complete. Each revelation felt like a gentle invitation to step further into the unknown, trusting that every breath, every synchronicity, guided you closer to the heart of an ever-unfolding mystery. Inevitably, your path led you to reflect on the broader implications of everything you had experienced. While your gift had personal dimensions, helping you navigate your own life with heightened awareness, it also appeared to carry collective ripples. You noticed that certain themes emerged in your visions, shedding light on societal shifts, environmental changes, or global events that felt too significant to ignore. Yet, you hesitated to announce these insights without caution. You had observed how easily fear could proliferate when people were presented with unsettling possibilities, and you refused to feed any panic. Instead, you chose to be precise about your words when sharing glimpses of broader trends. You focused on the solutions, the windows of opportunity, and the threads of hope you perceived weaving through every challenge. If someone insisted on hearing only the worst-case scenario, you'd gently remind them that every dark tunnel had a light at the end, and it was humanity's collective responsibility to move toward that light. This nuanced approach won you a kind of cautious respect, even from individuals who regarded themselves as realists or skeptics. They saw that you did not peddle doom for the sake of drama. Rather, you aimed to illuminate underlying patterns that might spur proactive change. Through these interactions, you realized that your role was evolving yet again. It was no longer enough just to decode visions about personal destinies or local events. You were being called to engage with a larger tapestry of human existence. In some ways, this prospect was daunting. The stakes felt higher and the margin for error more consequential. Yet, your inner compass remained steady, guiding you toward the expressions of truth most aligned with compassion. Perhaps the universe entrusted these revelations to you precisely because it recognized your commitment to wielding them responsibly. Still, you never forgot to nourish yourself. You remained diligent about the breathing practice, about retreating into silence when the cacophony of external demands threatened to overwhelm you. You found joy in small pleasures, a soulful conversation with a friend, a walk through a forest rich with the scent of pine, or even the taste of tea sipped mindfully in the morning sun. These simple rituals helped you balance the gravity of your calling with the gentle sweetness of human experience. By now, it was clear that your life story had become intertwined with the stories of many others. People arrived at your door, sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically, drawn by the promise of clarity they believed you could offer. And while you valued every opportunity to help, you also remained vigilant about reminding them of their own power. Your goal was never to cultivate dependence, but to spark a remembering in each person's heart that they, too, housed an innate capacity for insight. Over time, you discovered a remarkable truth. In guiding others to trust their own senses, you deepened your own. This reciprocity of awakening fueled your hope that the changes you once saw only in visions might eventually bloom into collective reality. Yet, acceptance did not unfold evenly. Some corners of society still viewed anything remotely prophetic with suspicion or outright hostility. Online forums became battlegrounds of opinion, where your name occasionally surfaced in heated debates between those who considered you a beacon of insight and those who dismissed you as a charlatan. You rarely engaged in these conflicts, sensing that such spaces were more about clinging to entrenched beliefs than sincere exploration. Nonetheless, witnessing the vitriol could be disheartening, and you reminded yourself that true understanding arises from an open heart, not from shouting matches. In the quieter realms where genuine seekers gathered, your presence was welcomed. There, curiosity replaced ridicule, and earnest dialogue supplanted mockery. People shared their own unexplainable experiences, bridging gaps in cultural and religious frameworks. Many expressed relief that someone was willing to discuss these phenomena without sensationalism. You felt gratitude each time these encounters unfolded with authenticity rather than spectacle. Your personal relationships continued to evolve too. The isolation you once endured gave way to a sense of chosen solitude. Rather than feeling cast out, you now recognized the value of selectiveness in whom you confided. You no longer wasted energy chasing acceptance from those determined to misunderstand you. Instead, you deepened bonds with the ones who approached you with open minds and hearts. You discovered a powerful truth: the quality of connection always mattered more than its quantity. Meanwhile, your visions did not stop. If anything, they acquired a new layer of depth, almost as though the tapestry of reality was unraveling more of its threads for you to see. You suspected that this heightened clarity was both a gift and a test, requiring you to demonstrate even greater discernment. Not every glimpse needed to be shared. Some were personal signposts, guiding your own journey of evolution. On those occasions when it felt right to voice a forewarning, you tried to do so in a manner that empowered rather than terrified. In your quieter moments of introspection, you considered how far you had come from a timid soul, riddled with self-doubt, to someone capable of standing tall in the face of controversy and disbelief. You had grown not through external praise, but through the relentless process of honoring your internal compass. Even when it guided you into uncharted territory, the obstacles you once viewed as curses had been the catalysts for your deepest growth, teaching you endurance, compassion, and humility. And so, you carried on, neither glorifying yourself as a visionary savior nor downplaying the significance of your evolving role. You stood in that delicate space between humility and confidence, certain of what you felt yet respectful of the fact that free will and mystery remained potent forces. In that space, you found a sense of peace that transcended fleeting judgments. Wherever life would lead you next, you were ready, breath steady and heart open, prepared to serve the grand unfolding you could sense in every fiber of your being. In time, the manifestations of your visions became so plain that even the most obstinate doubters paused. Events you'd quietly alluded to were unfolding in the public eye, aligning with a precision that few could label coincidence. Whispers shifted to stunned acknowledgement, and though some people insisted everything could still be explained away, their dismissals lacked the confidence they once held. You watched this transition with a level gaze, choosing compassion rather than triumph. You understood how disorienting it could be to have long-held assumptions appended by something that defied conventional understanding. When individuals approached you with apologies or reluctant admissions that you might have been right, you offered them understanding rather than reproach. It wasn't your aim to highlight their previous skepticism. You were more interested in guiding them toward a constructive relationship with the unknown. The apologies, though validating, did not define your sense of self-worth. You had learned that your true affirmation came from walking in integrity with what you knew to be real, regardless of others' opinions. This unfolding brought with it a fresh wave of responsibility. More people now sought your counsel, wanting advice on matters both personal and collective. Some asked whether they could alter impending events, hoping that awareness could serve as a shield against hardship. You patiently explained that the future was fluid, shaped by choices made in the present, and that foreknowledge was only one piece of the puzzle. Free will could shift trajectories, and no vision was a guarantee etched in stone. In many ways, the revelations were an invitation to act wisely, not a command from an unyielding fate. Nevertheless, a certain portion of your heart still carried scars from earlier ridicule. In your quieter moments, you remembered the hurtful words, the loneliness, the times you had second-guessed your entire reality. Healing, you realized, was ongoing. The validation that arrived in the form of unfolding events helped soothe old wounds, but true healing came from learning to trust yourself unconditionally. That trust was the bedrock upon which you could stand unshaken, even in the face of the world's upheavals. You also recognized that not everyone was meant to remain in your orbit. As some people gravitated toward your insights, others drifted away, unable to reconcile what they witnessed with their need for certainty. You let them go with kindness, understanding that every individual's path diverges according to the lessons they must learn. You had, after all, experienced firsthand how one's worldview can be shattered before it's remade into something more expansive. No single conversation or revelation can force that transformation. It must arise from within. So you welcomed each day with measured grace, mindful that the signs you saw were not an endpoint but part of an ever-evolving dance between destiny and choice. Beneath all the shifting perceptions around you, your primary commitment remained unaltered: to honor the visions entrusted to you, to share them responsibly, and to hold a lantern for those willing to brave the shadows and seek the light beyond. With each passing season, more voices joined the chorus of those who sensed the world was in a phase of profound change. At conversations that once dismissed higher possibilities as fanciful now teemed with open-ended wonder. You saw it in subtle ways: the neighbor who began meditating to find peace in chaotic times, the lifelong skeptic who admitted having recurring dreams that felt startlingly significant, the friend who confided that they couldn't shake the feeling they were being guided toward a new purpose. Such admissions were not as rare as they once were, and you welcomed them with compassion. Yet, amid this quiet awakening, you also noticed confusion as people tried to navigate beliefs that challenged everything they knew. Some sought gurus or latchkey explanations that would grant them instant enlightenment. Others oscillated between embracing their nascent insights and recoiling in fear of ridicule. Watching this unfold, you felt called to emphasize the importance of personal discernment. No single teacher, dogma, or technique could encapsulate the enormity of the mysteries at hand. You gently reminded them that every authentic revelation would resonate with a sense of peace and self-trust, rather than tension and unease. Through all this, you remained the steady presence you had worked so hard to become. You continued sharing your breathing practice with those receptive to it, explaining how it grounded you when visions became intense or when the weight of external skepticism felt heavy. People reported that the simple act of inhaling and exhaling in a mindful rhythm helped them rediscover an inner sanctuary they'd forgotten they possessed. Each person's story of relief or newfound clarity fueled your conviction that small, consistent efforts could spark lasting transformation. In parallel, your own personal expansions continued. The visions grew more nuanced, reflecting not just major future events, but also the subtle energetic shifts that contributed to them. You sensed that global and personal evolutions were inextricably linked, each individual's inner growth rippling outward into collective experiences. Rather than feeling overwhelmed, you embraced this perspective as a reminder that no effort was wasted. Even the simplest act of kindness could influence probabilities in ways unseen but deeply felt. Still, you faced moments of melancholy, for you were keenly aware that not everyone would choose to awaken. Some were simply not ready, others clung to material certainty, finding comfort in the illusion of control. You strove to respect their choices without judgment, recognizing that forcing anyone along would only breed resentment. Instead, you held firm to the belief that each soul's journey unfolded at its own pace, and all you could offer was the warmth of acceptance and the gentle spark of possibility. In this kaleidoscope of shifting beliefs, you found your joy in the connections that blossomed when fear was replaced by curiosity. Whether people fully embraced your gift or remained cautiously on the periphery, you sensed that a larger pattern was knitting itself together, a tapestry built on the threads of openness and mutual recognition that maybe, just maybe, the world was far more enchanted than it appeared. Eventually, a day arrived when you looked around and realized how profoundly life had changed for you and for those who once labeled you delusional. The unimaginable had taken shape in full public view, and people who ridiculed your words now grappled with the undeniable evidence before them. Yet, strangely, you felt no triumph in their stunned silence. All you sensed was a serene confirmation that the path you had walked, however lonely at times, was always aligned with a higher truth. Some of the very individuals who mocked you in the past began to approach with trembling questions, desperately wanting to know how to cope with realities they had never believed in until now. In these encounters, your empathy overruled any temptation to gloat. You remembered those earlier days of isolation and how painful it was to be misunderstood. Though you held no bitterness, you also stood firm in the knowledge that your journey wasn't about them in the first place. It was about fulfilling what had been whispered into your soul from the start. If their eyes were open now, it was because circumstances had made it impossible to look away. You offered what comfort and guidance you could, while still reminding them that no external source, not even your visions, could replace the wisdom they must cultivate within. Strangely enough, it was in witnessing their bewilderment and awe that you finally understood the deeper purpose behind every challenge you had faced. Without the painful scoffs and the lonely nights, you might never have honed the unwavering faith that kept you going. Without the heartbreak of rejection, you might never have tasted the sweet clarity of standing in your truth, unafraid of the world's judgments. Each perceived obstacle had shaped you into someone capable of holding steady in the face of both skepticism and reverence. With this realization came a quiet sense of fulfillment. Your role had never been to force anyone into believing your visions. Instead, it was to stand as a living testament possibility that there is far more to existence than meets the eye. You were a custodian of sacred knowledge, not to be hoarded, but to be tended and shared responsibly. Your life, once plagued by doubt, now seemed guided by an unbreakable internal compass. Even as you acknowledged the long arc of your journey, you felt a growing certainty that this was merely another dawn, not a conclusion. The world, having received its first undeniable glimpse of the extraordinary, was on the cusp of something bigger. You sensed it in the air, a collective hunger to understand life beyond the edges of ordinary perception. From here on, you would remain a steady force, bridging dimensions of seen and unseen, whispering reminders of our shared capacity for awe and revelation. Thus, you stood, breathing in the very promise of tomorrow, exhaling the last echoes of yesterday's disbelief. In the end, it was never about proving them wrong. It was about standing bravely in your calling, fully present to the miracle of being a vessel for truths that transcend logic. And in that sacred acceptance, your journey, once so misunderstood, found its rightful place in the grand design that keeps unfolding, breath by breath.